In this lesson, we'll create a spline effect coming out from our exploding letters. So we'd like to have, right where these letters are exploding, I want to have this sort of stream of letters coming out, curving back around, and eventually coming right across the front of the screen. So to do this, we need to draw out a spline. So I'm going to go ahead and go to a top view, and we'll draw out our spline from there. So I'm going to get to a point where the letters have sort of exploded a little bit, so we get an idea of where that center is. And then I'm just going to come up here, and I'm just going to go to a freehand spline. I'm just going to draw it out. So I'm going to come over here, back here, and then eventually right across the front. Now I can modify this. So I don't need it to go so far over. So I'm going to go ahead and pull it back. I can actually select the spline, and if I want to just set that to cubic, I can do that. And I'm going to go ahead and bring this back. I want it to go past the screen, but I don't need it to go too far past the screen. Okay, and so I'll just clean this up a little bit. Now we are going to have to go back into our camera view to really shape this, but I just want to real quickly just clean it up, kind of an S shape. Okay, so coming out from the center here, let's select this center point, and I want to bring it down sort of into the middle. Okay, and then this point I'm going to bring down a little bit, and I want it to sort of angle up. So I'm going to select this point, pull it up a bit, this point, and actually pull it up a little bit as well. So I want it to kind of come up, and in our camera view I'll bring it over a little bit, so we'll kind of angle up as it comes out. Okay, and then as it comes down here, sort of come down a little bit so we can see, get some depth to it. Now here it's off screen, or it's starting to get off screen, so I'm going to actually start to bring some of these points in a little bit more. Okay, same thing here. We'll go ahead and bring that down. And then this point, we'll go ahead and bring that in. And I want to actually pull that up a bit. And let's do the same thing here with these points. So go ahead and pull that up. And I want that to come right across the front of our screen here. Okay, so I can go ahead and pull this one up. Same thing here. And then back here, I'll go ahead and pull this down a little bit. So I want a nice sort of smooth curve shape. And I'll do the same thing here, kind of pull this down a little. And if we want to pull it back a little to get a more of a smooth shape, we can. Let's angle this front curve a little bit. So let me go ahead and grab this one and just pull it up a little, and then same thing here. So I want to get a nice layered effect. So it kind of goes back and forth, and we can kind of see the back and forth of it there. Okay. Smooth this up a little bit more. I want to actually be able to see, I think, looking at this, the letter sort of explosion there. And so let's go ahead and make sure that that comes up a little bit higher. So let's select this one on the end and just push it up a little bit so it's more in the gap. And let's actually, instead of angling it up, let's kind of angle it down, because I want to still get a hint of where that is as we're watching this fly around. And we'll kind of pull that one down a little bit, so that this explosion is sort of in the gap. Okay, so now what we want to do is create some geometry to come along this, and I want to create several different sort of shapes instead of having just one shape. And we can do that by just drawing out several different splines and combining them into a single one. So I'm going to go ahead and let's just call this our base spline. We're going to be using this several times, and so we want to make sure to keep this available to us. And now I'm going to come in and draw out some other splines. So I'm going to use just linear to create my splines, and I want to just create a kind of a grouping of different shapes here. So I'll go ahead and create that spline and go ahead and end it. And then I want to create another linear spline, and this one maybe is a little bit different. Okay, and then let's do maybe one or two more here. So go linear, and I'm just doing kind of triangles and maybe quads shapes, and I'll maybe do one more. And the exact shape of these isn't that important. So now I want to take these and I want to sort of move them out a little bit. So you're looking at the configuration. Just think of this as kind of the cross section of what our tube is going to be. So if you want to move anything around, maybe rotate it a little bit, or you can come in here and just move points around. Okay, I want to leave a big gap in the center for letters. Okay, because I want the letters to sort of spill out from this. So I'll create a fairly large gap there. Okay, now on the corners, and let's go ahead and combine these first. So I'll select all of them, connect objects, and delete. On the corners, these are really, really sharp. So what I want to do is select the corners, and then I can right click and go to chamfer. And I'll just add a little bit of chamfer to that so it's not completely sharp. Okay, I can do the same thing up here. The exact amount isn't important, so I'll just go ahead and do that again right here. All right, and let me just call this something like profile. Okay, so now we have our base spline and our profile. Let's create some geometry to flow along this curve. I'm going to turn off the background letters for now so we can see things a little bit more clearly. So to create geometry along this curve, what I want to do is create a sweep. So we'll go sweep NURBS. We'll drop the profile underneath it, and we'll drop the spline, the base spline underneath it. And now you can see here that the sweep NURBS is creating geometry that's flowing along that spline. Okay, now you can see right now that it's a little bit large. So if you want to change the scale, you can modify the scale a little bit, or you can come in here under details and change the beginning scale and the end scale. So we'll modify that a little bit. You can also change the position by changing the profile. So if I go back in here, so remember what that looks like. If I come back in here and take a look at the profile, for instance, I can squeeze in that gap a little by selecting these points. And let me try to get all those selected. So let me turn off select only visible. Can kind of squeeze that in to make that gap a little bit smaller. Do the same thing here. Okay. You go back and turn on our sweep NURBS and it's going to look a little bit different. Okay. Now for our base spline, we can change our intermediate points to make it look a little bit more smooth. Okay. Change the number of points here. Let's turn off our lines. And we get something like this. Now, we actually want it to be able to draw out. We want to animate the growth coming out. And so what we can do is actually animate a portion of this sweep. So if we take a look at this, you can see we have a start growth and an end growth. So the start growth here and the end growth is coming out here. So we can actually have that grow and fly on. Okay, so let's start it at about, so it explodes. And then let's start it maybe at frame 10 or 11. We can go ahead, set that growth to 0. And then by the end, we want it to have completely drawn on. So we'll go ahead and set that to 100%. Now if we play that through, explodes, And you can see it's growing real slowly. So what we want to do is actually move this keyframe. So we don't want it to complete its drawing until, or we don't want to leave the completion until 150 because we want to have some text drawn on. So what we can do is take this keyframe and let's select it here. And we can move this keyframe down to, let's try down 70. And you can just play with the timing. So here it's still pretty slow. Okay. I think it's still a little slow, so I'm going to move it all the way down to maybe 60. And let's go ahead and watch it again. That's a lot better. I do think that I want it to start a little bit earlier, so I'll move that key. And let's do that again. Let's move it again. Let's move it down a little bit more. So it looks a little bit more like it's causing that. We may need to move it all the way down to 4, where that explosion occurs. That's pretty good. So then we're going to have all those letters coming out. You can always go back in with your sweep, and if you want to change the scale, you can increase that scale a little bit more. You can see here that we have an actual spline that we can modify. So if that scale in the back needs to be taken up a little bit, and then maybe the scale in the front taken down, you can do that. Okay, but just keep in mind that we are going to have a bunch of letters coming out of this as well. All right. So now that we have our animated sweep coming out of our exploding letters, the next thing to do will be to duplicate and clone letters across this curve. Okay, because we want those letters to sort of appear and form out of this sweep that's coming out. All right, so we will use a cloner in a different way in the next lesson, and we have the ability to copy those across a particular spline. So we'll go ahead and do that in the next lesson.